Alrighty. Blade Lineage Mentor Meursault is a very painful unit to actually put into practice. For the amount of power he offers, he's got some harsh limits to work around if we want to see his ceiling. To make use of his entire kit, every last line of it, we would need to run the entire Blade Lineage, those of which have some less than ideal identities to actually put to field. On top of actually fielding them, all of them need to die before Kim becomes a one-man army. This leads to some complications in team building, at least if we want to use all of his kits. But that's not really what we're here for, are we? Most fellas only know one part of the man's kit, whether they've used him or not, and that's his yield my flesh to claim their bones. It's one of the single flashiest skills in the entire game, and has historically done a stupid amount of damage, but is that still true to this day? Rather, with all the new toys that we have, can't we push it even further beyond? Well, that's complicated. Rather, to get more out of this unique counter, we have to disregard a lot of the rest of his kit in order to boost it up. Speaking of which, we should probably outline what the rest of his kit even does first. First off, the man is getting old. 2 years almost. So a lot of this is not particularly standardized yet. We don't have magic numbers that are multiples of 6 in status, and we sure as heck don't have a ridiculous amount of coin power conditionals to draw upon. Instead, a lot of these skills actually roll quite high at a base to begin with. Skill 1 is Draw of the Sword. Got a single coin power conditional and goes poise negative if both coins crits due to decay. A large part of it, however, is its application of Sword of the Homeland Rending. This is a unique buff that is applied only to other members of the Blade Lineage and gives them final power on their skill 1s. With the full team, this can stack to 4 even, making the Blade Lineage surprisingly good at clashing even with their S1s. However, the major caveat is the need for an absolute resonance to apply it. This is a lot harder than you'd think to get it applied to all members, as it would require an absolute resonance of 5. And well, only 3 of them have an S1 that is Pride. Nowadays, with a 7th Sinner, we can more often make this at least a 4 res, but we'll still be missing the fastest Sinner out of the Blade Lineage. Of course, one of the others could just use a different skill affinity, but that defeats the point of running all of them. This becomes a lot easier to do in an unfocused encounter, but in a focused one where skill slots do not escalate, this is pretty much impossible to get the maximum effect out of while having everyone else benefit. Coupled with the potential randomness of speed, and well, if Yisang, Don, Meursault, and your 7th Sinner aren't next to each other, then you can forget about the absolute resonance to boot. Skill 2 is honestly where a majority of his damage is going to come from, at least in normal play. This is a pretty solid rolling free coiner that goes poise negative if all coins crit due to decay. There's a single coin power at 7 poise, one more than a lot of other modern IDs. On use, you get free poise counts, and on hits, you get free poise, so this helps things along early. On Clash Win, he also gains a slash power up on the following turn, and finally on crits, he deals extra damage on the 3rd coin. Similar to his S1, he also has Sword of the Homeland, this time penetrating. This one is significantly more painful than the S1 to get running, since the only other ID that shares a Pride skill 2 is Forced. Forced is also generally a lot faster than Meursault, meaning the two are more unlikely to end up next to one another. Even accounting for a 7th Sinner, we're more likely to only hit an absolute resonance of 3, meaning while it does become a lot more usable compared to when we only had 6 Sinners to field, it's still very clunky. That said, buffing skill 2s by up to 4 final power is rather insane. Even BL Don, a 00 ID, suddenly goes from 16 to 20, which is surprisingly decent. There is not much saving BL Otis at their 14 to 18. Regardless, the final power buff of 4 can only happen in an unfocused encounter or by underslotting Kimsault, so it's more of a nice to have at the end of the day rather than particularly useful, especially with the speed rolls of the Blade Lineage. Now, the skill 3 is the first half of his claim to fame. Yield My Flesh is a negative rolling skill on a positive SPID. It rolls downwards due to wanting this skill to lose to trigger its other half. On its own, it's a poise stim and some crit damage with a sprinkle of aggro and berserker modifiers, but its other half is where the money is at. On Clash Lose, after getting hit, used to claim their bones. This is a unique counter that hits extremely hard. When all the modifiers are maxed out, this skill has a 205% damage multiplier, rolls 4 coins, and inflicts a weirdly high amount of paralyze the following turn. Very important to note, this skill's coin power is not affected by regrets, but Yield My Flesh does roll lower with regret's passive. Plus, if you want to improve the activation chance of To Claim Their Bones, regret helps it roll a lot lower, but doesn't directly increase To Claim Their Bones' damage. There's some weird tech there, but we'll get to that later. Regardless, with enough poise, this thing is also an AoE, but loses out on the final 100% damage modifier on a single target. Now, as flashy as all of this is, without a way of gaining coin power, this skill hits for less than you may initially expect. All of that to say, even as flashy as Bones Claiming is, it's long been outscaled. That said, it's not like we can't have fun with this skill, just that we should keep our expectations in check. Finally, the normal counter skill just gives him poise and slash power. It does a little more damage if he's injured, but that's about it. Anyhow, the passives come after. He's one of the earlier IDs to have an always-on passive as well as a fueled one. In Memoriam is one that regards the death of his fellow Blade Lineage members. Losing 3 Blade Lineage IDs gives a whole bunch of benefits. Mostly that he goes poise neutral and he increases his poise gain. When all other members of the Blade Lineage are dead though, he now goes poise positive no matter what, on skills that gain count. He also gains Swordplay of the Homeland, a very potent damage buff, though this does come up as Remembrance instead for flavor. As for the fueled passive, it's a resonance one. Free Pride Resonance activates Swordplay of the Homeland, not to be confused with the buff Swordplay of the Homeland. With this passive active, he can shrug off death once per encounter. It's particularly useful if you plan to claim bones at low HP. Past that, whenever Meursault would gain poise, he shares 1 potency encounter around to 2 other members of the Blade Lineage. If all 6 members are fielded, this increases to 2 of each instead. Aside from that, he of course hands out Swordplay of the Homeland. The buff, not the passive, to all other members of the Blade Lineage. Now that's all well and good and all. He rolls surprisingly high, enough to keep up with a lot of modern IDs despite being almost 2 years old. But the damage is a bit lacking, and the reliance on team synergy alongside his utility puts him in an awkward spot. How the hell are we going to build him with modern Limbus in mind? Well, there's a couple of ways, but let me first introduce a little concept that usually floats around in the Magic the Gathering community. Yes, I know, card games with a sweaty nature, but hear me out. This concept is relevant regardless of what kind of game you play. Timmy, Johnny, and Spike. While the names usually aren't the most important here, the types of player each one is will be. Now, Timmy is the kind of fella that is bright-eyed and loves huge and practical combos. They love pumping power, building full tribal decks, exodias, and heavily themed cool stuff. They'll be quick to call something strong if there's a huge ceiling and a way of getting there, even if it isn't particularly practical. They'll take a lot of things at face value and play in a predictable manner if it means getting their fancy combo off. Timmy usually isn't a good player, but they are a dreamer that will make some ridiculous show-stopping plays when given the chance. This is the kind of guy that tells you the stars will eventually align and that their killer combination will eventually work. As for Johnny, well, that fella knows the game like the back of his hand and wants to play something that no one else is running. They likely know the weird techs, the edge cases, obscure interactions, and of course strange routing that will eventually get them their desired goal. This is the kind of player that knows what works, what's practical, and finds a decent middle ground to show off something others likely haven't seen before or even know is possible. Johnny is usually a stupid good player that puts on a handicap because it's more fun for them that way, and winning all of the time doesn't interest them as long as they get to see different play patterns and new scenarios they can add to their repertoire. This guy is the weirdly lovable guy that can find you the missing piece in your deck all of the time. Now, as for Spike, Spike's a bit of an arsehole. He just wants to win. That's it. Hyper-competitive, slave to the meta, knows the win rate and matchup chart despite it having come out less than 5 minutes ago. They'll never run anything short of tier 0, and will call a judge on you if it means getting any form of advantage whatsoever. They are cutthroats and beyond talking down. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're good at the game or have a full in-depth knowledge on how everything ticks. Just that they know what they need to win, and an essential knowledge on how not to lose. They are on paper a very good player, but in a limited scope that is tailored specifically for their skills and mentality. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean they win, just that they're fiercely competitive. Now you might be thinking, what does any of that have to do with Limbus Company? Well, you see, we can apply the labels to Limbus too in how players will approach team building and play. Timmy would run theme-teamed compositions with huge payoffs. Say all the Hay Shows, the Pequod Trio, or the Blood Fiends, perhaps the Kurokuma Gang in full, or more relevantly, all 6 members of the Blade Lineage. Perhaps their team for getting Kimsault to function would look closer to this. Blade Lineage Sinclair, Yi-Sang, Force, Don, Otis, and of course Meursault. For the final slot, they'd either underslot to give Meursault another skill slot, or take in either Meursault or Captain Ishmael for their support capabilities. This way, all of Kimsault's skills, passives, and buffs can be used by the entire team. Heck, he can afford to use Regret to boost his coin power too, and make yielding his flesh easier. Captain Ishmael can give them extra attacks and pride resonances, damage up, and poise if it all goes well. It's a semi-pride resonance team already. Meanwhile, if we took Meursault instead, you'd have a second for Acalgia and Chaff Clear to boot. Happy days. Once in a blue moon, you'll get to claim bones for okay enough damage, and the rest of the team is mostly on theme. It's all rather straightforward for Timmy to pilot and build. Heck, you can currently dispense every single part, or even use LCB IDs for their support capabilities. If the stars somehow align now and Kimsault claims bones with all the conditionals and buffs on offer, it's still a reasonably hard hit. 60 base power, a crits, maybe some red plum blossom. If lucky enough, maybe a few damage ups from Ishmael and Don. Maybe perhaps even some support passives landing. Rodnya and Ting Tang Honglu's head buffs. Oh, maybe even Heathcliff and a Gregor too. If it all comes together, he could still hit really hard with bonus claiming, right? After all, a 205% multiplier if he has the poise, missing HP, and crits a single target should be guaranteed. 60% damage from those support passives, and of course, 30% damage up and a 30% multiplier from Red Plum Blossom. Should let Timmy's Kimsault wreck shop with bones claiming. Well, assuming Pride and /normal alongside an offense level difference of 5, Timmy is hitting for around 450 damage or less due to Red Plum Blossom Decay. Don't get me wrong, that's still really high, but it's far from the limit one could imagine this skill going to. If we were back in Season 3, this kind of damage would look insane, but as we get past Season 4 and beyond, this amount of damage isn't all too unheard of. If we place full stop Heathcliff in there without optimizing all too much of the rest, he can hit for around 425 on his S3 with all his modifiers maxed out, with significantly less effort to boot. He also doesn't need 5 other members of the Blade Lineage to keep his fuel going. Timmy, what are you doing, mate? It isn't worth using so many of the old IDs for the team fantasy. Even with how nice swordplay of the homeland and the other buffs are helping, the old designs are cracking at the seams. Plus, let me introduce to you the absurdity that is Johnny's way of using Kimsault. Now, Johnny knows that Sword of the Homeland buff from S1 and S2 aren't very practical. Heck, they don't affect enough of the Blade Lineage to come into full effect all of the time. Plus, he's fine with doing away with quite a few of the members of the Blade Lineage if it means squeezing out more use. To add on top of this, Johnny doesn't care about a vast majority of his kits. It's a means to an end. And that end is bones claiming. To hell with swordplay, we're here to get hits and slam back as hard as remotely possible. And we're going to do it without MD gifts or any of that jazz. We're here to hit such a ridiculous number without having to rely on anyone else. Plus, let's start at the beginning. Kimsault gives himself a 205% multiplier on the skill if it crits, and 1/power if he uses a skill 2 the turn before. Claim Your Bones also has a +5 offense level, so if we assume the opponent is equal defense level, that's a +5 differential. From his kit alone, we're Fuss at 60 base power with a 205% multiplier and a 1.2 times multiplier from poise, and 16% from level diff. Okay, where can we go from there then? Well, you see, we can't scale the base damage off of coin power, so Regret isn't as big a friend as you'd imagine. At least considering we're not as bothered to use his skill 1 and skill 2 for any real damage. But what if we took Screw Loose Wallop instead? The surgeries alone can get him 80% extra damage multiplier, and if we time the final surgery correctly, that's free extra defense power. Since Claim Your Bones is a defense skill, this raises it directly. We're going from a base of 60 to 72, while getting 80% increased damage. We're now at 72 base and 285% increased damage from Screw Loose alone, in place of Regret doing nothing for the damage ceiling on Bones claiming. Okay, what next? Well, Crushbound passed. We'll need to use this almost immediately to get the eventual 12 stacks for all that sweet offense level. Oh, and on the metronome term, we get a damage up too. So suddenly that's 4 more offense level difference and 10% more damage. That places us at 295% with 26% from level difference. Very funky. I mean, we could capote for another base power, so long as we manage to get more eyes on him. We may be able to get that extra base power, pulling us up 1 more to 76 base power. All that from the man alone though. That's a lot of ego we're going to need to pull out of our asses. 2 overclocked screw looses at the minimum, a Crushbound and a capote. That's a stupid amount of resources, but all of them do buff bones claiming. Okay, so how much farther can we go then? Well, we've got to rely on the team for that, so let's start simple. 7 Meursault, 5 slash fragile and 2 defense down, placing us at a level difference of 11 and 50% more increased damage. He could also give us a nebulizer to boot. Also, weird thing about this ID, her coin count is tiny, but she's so grossly overstated with her rolls and offense level that she actually rolls shockingly well. Just don't expect much damage from her. She's here to supplement Kimsault purely. Now, in a specific set of nodes, Meursault can be slotted twice for free, meaning this is actually 2 more defense down and 5 more slash fragile. In those fights, we'll decidedly not factor that in here for now, especially since level shenanigans will go entirely whack. So we're now sitting at 11 level difference and 345% damage increased. Let's do another easy one. Rabbit Heathcliff, 4 fragile. Easy enough, 40% more damage increase. Okay, what about Forced? Well, if she ever uses Foracalgia, that's turning Kim immediately poise neutral, which goes an exceedingly long way in making his conditionals more viable. Aside from that, we're mostly here for Red Plum Blossom, which is a unique 30% multiplier when stacked up, similar to Gaze, which means now we have a huge damage boost. We can also offer 2 defense downs and 2 slash fragiles on turn, though realistically we're only going to get 1 slash fragile and defense down at most if we're lucky and multiple body parts exist, otherwise it may as well be 0. Plus we can get 1 more defense down and potentially a slash fragile. Mind you, we're now almost double of Timmy's bone claiming. To kick it up further, we're going to be looking at Ishmael. Captain Ishmael is fine, but realistically any of them are. The Captain just has a solid enough Sin Affinity spreader to get her main appeal outs. We're looking at Blind Obsession, specifically back-to-back overclocked Blind Obsessions. This is 2 damage up and 3 Pride Fragility that lasts this turn and the next. It's exceedingly powerful for our use case here. It's also stupid expensive at 18 resources per use and an ungodly amount of sanity burn. This is by far our most risky option, but if we somehow don't stagger or kill our team when using it twice like this, we're getting 100% increased damage. This is one of those things that's so ungodly stupid, it's hard to believe anyone would actually consider making use of it. Yet here we are. Next up is Lord Hongers. Yes, this one is probably our newest addition to the team. His affinity spreads are good, but we're mostly here for his S1 and S3. If used the turn before we are to claim bones, the S3's follow-up inflicts a slash resistance down, meaning we're getting a really clean 10% amp in damage from there. When used on the same turn, the S1 grants a defense power up, meaning bones claiming is now at an 80 base power. At this point we're now breaching into 4-digit territory. As for our final fielded unit, Zweigregor. Now you may be thinking, what the fuck, that smoker is kinda useless. But in reality, it is because he smokes that he is insanely useful to us now. Why? Because that S3 where he takes a drag gives us 2 defense power up, which means bones claiming is now an 88 base. At that point, even if Red Plum Blossom Decay is factored in, we're easily coasting into the 4 digits on bones claiming with a final coin roll of 28. And now we need some support passives to round us out. First off, we're taking the biggest buffs we can find and reasonably use, which is funny enough, all of them. Late Lineage Otis gets used here, since as we take surgeries, we can't use LCB Otis anymore. That's 30% against targets under 25%. Then we're looking at Rodya, which is 20% on head hits. We will need to reduce Gregor's HP though. We're also looking at a Mexiclaire for the generic 10% against those with lower SP. Finally, because we need some more degrees of reliability for our biggest multiplier, we're looking at BL Don and Yi Sung to ensure that poise stays healthy. If we place all the math together at this point, well, we've got a base of 88, a static multiplier of 162, and a dynamic multiplier of 655%. All of that gets boosted by 30% for the first coin, 27% for the second, 24% for the third, and finally 21% for the final coin, ballparking us at between 1100 and 1200 damage on one of the strongest possible bones claiming without resorting to the Mirror Dungeon's gifts or other bonuses. Now, for obvious reason, there's a lot of reliability issues here, like a stupid number of them. Heck, this almost seems like a Timmy combo due to how impossible a vast majority of this sounds. But to shortlist them, there's too much ego resources required to get this much power out. The double blind obsession and screw loose wallops are already expensive. The rest of the egos would be too. The only remedy for this one is if we're in a normal story dungeon and abusing contempt or ego resource stacking. Surgery makes Meursault stupid fast. He's no longer going last after all the debuffs are applied. This one is a lot harder to combat, though we're going to be able to accommodate by giving Meursault significantly lower speed by using Chains of Others the turn before. We'll lose a final power since we can't slot a skill 2, but we're also making it possible to begin with, meaning we're now down to 84 power instead of 88. Still respectable, but without external bind effects, we don't have a way of making this work otherwise. We're clashing too high with Yield My Flesh now. This one is the worst part of all of it. We're at a +3 attack power from the final surgery, not to mention a +4 clash power from accumulated past, and offense level gains, meaning in a lot of cases we can't actually lose that clash anymore. Not unless it's some god move that we're not supposed to win to begin with. This can be combated with the same method as the speed issue, but now requires a second body part to hit. Chains of Others also reduces our attack power alongside the opponent's, so we need to hit a body part we're not planning on clashing that turn, meaning this entire Johnny build does not work unless we're against something with multiple parts to begin with, potentially lowering our final damage outputs unless we can destroy all other parts but the one we're planning on clashing. Otherwise, we have to pray for the attack weights to not reach over the other parts. With those caveats out of the way, how the hell do we even achieve all of that? Well, we'll need to plan not for a single fight, but for an entire dungeon instead. For every node that isn't a boss, we're going on the hard grind of getting ego resources. This could mean playing suboptimally or rotating in other sinners in the composition, take on foes first with their more ideal sin affinities. Biao Yisung and Don both have the more preferred sin affinities we can make use of, so substituting them in on the way makes for a solid idea. Next, we need a stupid long fight of some kind for the finale, something that's potentially multi-phase and could take significantly more than 12 turns. When that fight hits, we need to crush bound and wait out 12 turns, hit Capote at some point, and overclock a screw loose at least once. We then need to lower Meursault's HP strategically to under 25% for the final surgery 2 turns before go. On the turn before go, we would then want to hit an overclocked blind obsession, a Lord Honger's skill free, and a 7 Roshu skill free. We'll likely need to Chains of Others a part that doesn't matter and everyone else can finally focus on breaking it. If possible, we'd want to mix in a Heathcliff body sack to ensure he's faster too. Finally, when it's time to go, time to finally wreck shop, we need to sequence everything very carefully. Heathcliff will quick suppression the target parts. Hongers just needs to use his S1 on anything, same with Gregor and his S3. Then Ishmael needs to overclock another blind obsession and Roshu needs to hits with an S2. Finally, False needs to crits with both parts of her S3, for Meursault to finally lose a clash and yield his flesh to claim their bones. All that effort for a 4-digit payoff. Mind you, that is an exceedingly stupid amount of damage to get off in normal content regardless, but it certainly isn't one-shot territory. While the rest of the fight, these guys can likely hold on their own. Most of the IDs here existed specifically for that moment, and will be running out of gas. Rabbit Heathcliff especially will be running out of bullets, unless you put him on evasion duty, in which case, he could perhaps go another round. As for the rest of them, their S3s were their claim to fame here, and the rest of their kits aren't doing all too much favors now. Now, if we wanted to push this to the theoretical extreme, possibility and practicality be damned, just to put each possible thing in there, we can add back the false stuff that will never land, and change the sin resistances. Now we're sitting in the ballpark of 2.7k damage. Okay, what if we go even further beyond, and for the sake of argument, Roshu somehow has a double slot? Well, we're now at 2.9k, just the tiniest bit short of 3k. All of this is impossible, of course, but that's not to say a man can't dream. That's the Johnny build. at least the one I'm willing to run. As for Spike, at this point, Spike will never use BL Meursault. He's too clunky for less payoff than most modern IDs. Perhaps if he needs a slashing bot, he'll take him and use regret on him. Otherwise, there are better IDs out there to fill the same slots of high physical damage on demand with far less complications. Anyhow, if you'll indulge me, I'll give you the usual caveat to these specific labels. Most players don't fall into one category or the other, and instead usually overlap several or all of them. Everyone's been where Timmy is. We've all been rookies and newbies at some point, staring at things that seem ridiculously powerful or complicated and thinking, wow, I want to be able to use that. Or X must be OP because of Y, but Z is just cool, etc. We've all been there, myself included. The Blade Lineage was my Timmy team. I wanted to run a Poise team so badly since I joined in Season 4, and couldn't shard any of the IDs from Season 3. They just hit the right vibe for me, and I didn't really know any better about how the game worked. Plus, the Blade Lineage seemed like they'd produce some of the highest damage numbers I'd ever see. I would love them to death and always keep them maxed out, etc. Only I started slowly becoming a Spike. I started aiming to clear content as fast as possible. Sub 20-minute mirror dungeon clears, nothing but bloody mist to the painters, and a whole lot of bleed. There was fun in racking up the MD clears and speeding through like nobody's business, but that thrill only lasted so long as the most efficient strategies kept shifting around and not making much use of the teams I wanted to run for fun. When you'd have to spend an hour in the MD with a sinking team because you couldn't purely win rate it without Hongers discarding the wrong stuff, or Heathcliff mounting his haunts, it felt sad and like a waste of time. Spike hates sinking. It takes too long to clear, but eventually you become a Johnny. My case was making pre-Hey Show Rupture work, the days of Talisman Sinclair and the 15 free conditionals. I was the biggest Davat defender because delivery drivers with a Berserk button seemed like a cool thing to run. That and everyone kept calling them potential units, and I wanted to show them that wasn't the case. Regardless, that's where I comfortably sit now, making weird off-meta compositions and pushing the boundaries of what the game is willing to offer. Plus, this video is a bit more of a return to form with the content, as it's a bunch of stuff you wouldn't think that works together, but strangely does. Alongside a stupid rant about game design or community zeitgeist. For the one guy complaining about me only making status teams and not doing the weird stuff, this one goes out to you. Nonetheless though, if you're a Timmy or a Johnny, Kimsault has ways of surprising you. And whenever we get defense power, remember him. Because the more sources of defense power we get, the harder Bones claiming is allowed to hit. God forbid if we ever get more global coin power, or if the tier 4 mirror dungeon gifts are granted by Aleph egos. And this man will come back with a vengeance. Anyhow, a final note on the Johnny build. You don't absolutely need everything to line up to do obscene amounts of damage on Kim's skills. It's just that everything mentioned does indeed contribute to Bones claiming in some way or another. As most fights are over quite quickly, you can of course omit some of the more costly egos and rely on weaker stims. Rather than a double blind obsession, you could use one the turn before and pray for him to get Ishmael's assist attack buffs instead. Heck, you can ignore the smaller Crushbound buff and Capote ones altogether, to make losing that clash so much easier. If you want, omitting Screw Loose for regrets instead to make use of the rest of his kits is a viable option too. Really though, when it comes to this guy, since he's a poise unit that doesn't have particularly strict conditionals, you can do many things with him. He's as close to a Swiss Army knife from Meursault as you're going to get, even with the new guys out there. Plus, even if you only take some of the ideas here to incorporate, or take a small fraction of things that buff him up, I reckon this video was worth making. As for part of my spite here, well, I recently saw a video of someone using the Blade Lineage team against 933, calling it Bones claiming in the big 2026, and mate, you didn't use it a single time there. You used our guy as bait. That said, I think that about sums it up. Once again, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. I will be putting out a video like this for each of the sinners I haven't done an ID review for yet, meaning we've got Sinclair, Rodya, and Roshu to come. I'll likely be putting out a poll for Sinclair first, I reckon. Aside from that, the community Discord is still open. We've been talking spoilers about the Canto content, some game design, and theory crafting. Regardless, thanks for watching or listening in, and I'll catch you guys in a few days. Hang on. Wait, no, please, no. There are limits to what I'm willing to test. Why? Why are you here? The bottom of the barrel, the monster under your bed, the master of the F tier. Why is Sinclair here? No, you're joking. Please. Please tell me you're joking. Wait, no. He has 2 defense power up. That's double of Honglu. Please, I have a family, a girlfriend, and a cat. Don't make me do this. Don't make me justify his usage here. Fuck the math. I'm not leveling him. He's not coming along to the next fight. I'm not taking footage of the cunt to use. Please. If for some reason you wish to be a specific kind of madman, Zwei Sinclair can give you 2 defense power instead of the 10% damage increase that's offered by Mexiclair. You can then slot Ting Tang Honglu instead, which offers 20% instead of 10%, being a major net gain. This places us in the ballpark of 3,000 damage. Since we got plenty more damage increase, we can substitute in one more source of defense power up. Rather than using BL Otis, we can instead make use of G Corp Otis, and on that 1 in 3, she offers a defense power up from the bench. Somehow this adjustment in Otis is exactly a single point of damage. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm bothered to calculate fuss. After all of that math and stupidity, here's the theoretical best bones claiming team available. Never use this team. I repeat, never use this team. I will personally come and claim your bones, even if I have to yield my own flesh. Thank you for watching. I'm going to spend the next few days cooking fire or something. We'll see what we do indeed come back with.